Hey there! This is Sally's Book Club. Tune in daily for the world's best books, all corporated just for you. Today we're diving into a magnum opus by Professor Samuel Huntington, former president of the American Political Science Association. The book is titled The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Cold War essentially ended right then and there.
By 1990, during the Gulf War, the dying Soviet Union could only watch helplessly on live TV as America cockaied its high-tech warfare.
A year later, as the Soviet colossus collapsed in a cloud of dust, the West celebrated the end of history, convinced liberal democracy and capitalist markets would reign supreme.
But within just a few years, global elites began realizing the world was getting messier and harder to comprehend.
The most perplexing question emerged. Who are our friends? Who are our foes? Mao Zedong called this the fundamental question of politics. Mencius warned that nations without external threats perish, while Westerners fundamentally agree with Carl Schmitt's axiom. Politics is about defining friends and enemies. This principle was echoed by George W. Bush's post-9/11 ultimatum. Either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. But now we face a new dilemma. Where have all the enemies gone? During the Cold War, identifying enemies was straightforward. Nations could align with secondary enemies against primary threats, maneuvering through diplomatic chess games.
Politics was like night navigation through treacherous seas. Enemies served as lighthouses guiding the way. Post-Cold War. Those guiding lights vanished, leaving complete darkness. Seasoned strategists found themselves paralyzed by this void. Remember that poignant line from James Bond's M in 007, I miss the Cold War. That sentiment surely resonated with intelligence officers worldwide.
Amid this global disorientation, Professor Samuel Huntington stepped forward. A lighthouse named Clash of Civilizations now stands in the dark ocean of uncertainty. In 1993, Huntington's 27-page essay, The Clash of Civilizations, was published in Foreign Affairs magazine. By 1996, Huntington expanded this thesis with additional research and documentation into a full-length book. This became the seminal work we're discussing today, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. Huntington clearly posits that civilizations, not nations, are Earth's fundamental units, existing in dynamic imbalance of power. Nations cluster around core civilizations, maintaining internal structures but lacking intercivilizational order.
This disorder between civilizations manifests as conflict, the ultimate expression being wars along civilizational fault lines. These wars often ignite from grassroots cultural misunderstandings, amplified by civilizational differences into full-blown conflicts.
Resolution typically requires coordination between core states of respective civilizations. The outcomes of these clashes determine the future trajectory of civilizations. In essence, your enemy is whoever differs from you. You read Dream of the Red Chamber. They read Shakespeare. You value humility, they see it as weakness. You watch The Last Samurai together.
When samurai charge hopelessly at the end, you're moved by their honor, they see meaningless suicide.
Ultimately, you're fundamentally different. Though international organizations exist above nations and NAGOs below, nation-states remain primary actors. These subnational entities matter, but sovereign states pursuing national interests truly shape international relations. The key debate centers on interpreting national interests. Some argue national interests merely mask ruling class agendas. Others maintain that nations possess unique and irreplaceable interests. Some view national interests as outcomes of domestic power struggles, while Huntington argues nations define interests through civilizational lenses. Thus, a nation's conduct fundamentally reflects its civilizational identity. The real fault lines lie not in borders but minds raising the first crucial question: what defines civilization? Now, about this concept of civilization. Like other foundational social concepts, civilization's tangible presence defies precise definition. Huntington outlines civilization's structural features, unique belief systems, languages, customs, and social norms, though interpretations vary widely. Among defining elements, religion stands paramount in delineating civilizations. Religion-anchored civilizations shape our life, purposes, values, and meanings. Ultimately, what separates us from them isn't borders or skin color, but civilizational identity. Therefore, understanding civilizations requires focusing on religious foundations. Grasping religion's centrality becomes key to deciphering civilizational dynamics. Through religion's lens, global complexity clarifies into 7 civilizations: Western Christian, Chinese Confucian, Islamic Hindu, Orthodox Christian, Latin American Catholic Indigenous Blend, and Japanese Confucian Shinto synthesis. Since the Axial Age, human history has been shaped by these 7 civilizations' interactions. Civilizations adopt varying political forms across eras: city-states, feudal kingdoms, empires, modern nation-states. Their manifestations remain fluid through time. Yet the essence of civilization remains eternal. Moreover, civilizations exhibit biological characteristics. They emerge, expand, contract, and sometimes perish through historical cycles. Both their internal essence and external manifestations evolve with time. For instance, original Christian civilization diverged into Catholicism, Orthodox Christianity, and Protestantism. Christianity's sphere expanded from the Mediterranean to encompass Europe, Americas, Oceania, and parts of Asia, Africa. Within modern nation-states, Christian civilizations developed tripartite structures: core states, peripheral nations, and external influence zones. Protestant civilization centers around Anglo-American core states. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and northwestern Europe form Protestant civilization's peripheral belt. Protestant communities in non-Western regions constitute external influence zones. This includes historical European colonies and modern Christian enclaves worldwide. The Orthodox core comprises Russia, West, Ukraine, Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Cyprus. Other Orthodox nations form the peripheral layer. Orthodox diaspora communities create external influence areas. This tripartite structure exists across all major civilizations. Chinese civilization centers around mainland China, with Korea, Vietnam, and Singapore forming the periphery. Overseas, Chinese communities as external influence. Islamic civilization uniquely lacks a definitive core state. Potential Islamic core states like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey all have critical weaknesses preventing leadership. Though Islam originated with Arabs and the Quran uses Arabic, Sunni dominance complicates unified leadership. But Iran is Persian and Shia minority, while Turkey pursues Westernization as a Turkic nation. Among potential Arab core states, Iraq was devastated by Western powers, and its Shiite majority complicates leadership. Egypt remains geopolitically marginal in North Africa, financially dependent on Gulf oil states. Saudi Arabia, while controlling Islam's holy sites and oil wealth, struggles with small population and military weakness against Houthi rebels.
Failed campaigns against Yemen's Houthis exposed Saudi Arabia's limitations as regional leader.
Another coreless civilization is Latin America. 4 major Latin American nations: Mexico, Venezuela, Argentina, and Brazil. Mexico gravitates toward U.S. influence through NAFTA, distancing from Latin American leadership. Venezuela remains too weak and internally divided for regional leadership.
Argentina never recovered from the Falklands War defeat by Britain.
Brazil possesses landmass and population for global power status, but stands apart speaking Portuguese in Spanish-dominated region. Argentina would never accept Brazilian leadership in Latin America. Civilizations with core states develop structural advantages over leaderless counterparts. Core states mediate internal conflicts and negotiate intercivilizational disputes, creating order.
Leaderless civilizations lack stable structures, making conflict resolution difficult.
Huntington observes that post-Cold War conflicts mainly involve either leaderless Islamic civilization clashing with others or internal Islamic sectarian conflicts. This essentially reflects hegemonic stability theory. Major civilizations maintain order through dominant powers. When lions rule, jackals dare not prowl. Hegemony brings stability. Its absence breeds chaos. Even Saddam's minor hegemony previously prevented groups like ISIS from emerging.
His removal unleashed chaos across the Middle East.
Civilizational power dynamics are both uneven and constantly evolving. Western civilization remains dominant across 14 key areas according to Huntington. Controlling global finance, hard currencies, consumer markets, manufacturing, and military capabilities. Western dominance extends to capital markets, moral leadership, and naval supremacy, advanced technology, education, aerospace, communications, and weapons systems, complete Western hegemony. Historically, Western technological and military superiority reshaped global order, forcing other civilizations to respond to Western challenges. Non-Western responses typically follow 3 patterns: rejection, wholesale Westernization, or reform. We Chinese have navigated all 3 responses in our modernization journey. Refusing means stubbornly, denying your superiority, pretending not to see your advances, fighting to the death when challenged, only reconsidering after defeat. Most civilization initially reacted this way to Western challenges. The stronger and more distant from West, the more resistant they were. Chinese and Japanese civilizations maintained rejection until Second Opium War. Japan's shogunate maintained isolation until 1854, when U.S. Navy arrived.
China had its doors forced open by British gunboats.
When resistance fails, survival demands becoming Western, as Russia and Turkey demonstrated. Russians and Turks adopted wholesale Westernization as survival strategy. Russia's Westernization began with Peter the Great in 17th century adopting Western technology and institutions. Proximity to West and shared Christian foundation eased Russia's transformation. This enabled Russia to ride Western expansion wave, eventually becoming Cold War superpower. Achieving parity with US. Russia remains major global power. A success story. Turkey embraced Westernization after Ottoman collapse, choosing modernization over extinction. Kemal's 1920s reforms transformed Islamic Ottoman Empire into secular Turkish Republic. Though Turks appear Westernized, fundamental issues remain unresolved.
In reality, such transformations create profound dilemmas.
Core question. Can Westernized individuals truly become Westerners? Does Westernized version still retain authentic identity?
Would Westerners ever accept transformed outsiders? This heartbreaking question lingers.
Deep down, Russians remain Russian, no matter how they reform. As Westerners say, strip a Russian, you'll find a tatter underneath. Russian intellectuals remain divided between Westernizers and Slavophiles across regimes, terrorist, Soviet, or federal. Westernizers embrace European values, while Slavophiles fiercely guard Orthodox traditions, locked in perpetual conflict.
This ideological split creates national cognitive dissonance with dire consequences.
Russian elites often lack historical grounding when defining national interests.
Turkey faces similar identity, limbo, Western rejection persists while maintaining Islamic roots. EU's continued rejection forces Turkey to revisit Ottoman legacy and Islamic identity.
Can reformism offer third-way solutions without cultural amputation? Reformists distinguish Westernization, cultural assimilation from modernization, technical progress. Modernization means adopting technology, urban systems, and state institutions. Westernization implies embracing Hellenic philosophy, Christian values, and individualism. The reformist formula: embrace modernity, reject cultural colonization. Maintaining civilizational identity through selective modernization remains theoretical. Debates continue whether constitutional governance constitutes Westernization or modernization. Japan stands as lone, non-Western success in balancing modernization with cultural preservation. China's ongoing modernization journey remains incomplete but determined. South Korea's economic miracle still trails Western development benchmarks. Singapore achieved modernization, but remains too small and unique for broader relevance. Other non-Western civilizations show even less progress in modernization. Not a single Islamic nation meets modern state standards despite vast population and territory. Even Turkey, once modernization exemplar, increasingly embraces religious conservatism.
Arab secular republics like Egypt and Iraq, established by free officers' movements, were toppled by monarchies and Western powers post-2000s, derailing modernization. Ironically, modernization achievements became tools for religious extremists to reject progress.
The 1979 Iranian Revolution, ignited Islamic revivalism across Muslim world.
This movement gained strength through Afghan resistance against Soviets, fueled by post-Cold War ideological vacuum.
The Cold War essentially constituted intra-Western conflict between capitalism and socialism. Ideological confrontation masked underlying civilizational tensions within Western civilization.
Cold War's end exposed raw civilizational conflicts globally.
Islamic nations realigned geopolitically along civilizational lines post-Cold War. Catholic, Protestant nations like Poland and Hungary swiftly rejoined Western civilization. Baltic states Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia were aligned with Nordic countries, reclaiming Western heritage.
Two former Soviet republics, Muslim Azerbaijan and Christian Armenia, went to war over territorial disputes.
Turkey predictably supported Muslim Azerbaijan against Christian Armenia, while Orthodox Russia backed Armenia against both.
The most apocalyptic developments occurred in the Balkans.
During Cold War, Orthodox Greece and Muslim Turkey jointly confronted Warsaw Pact's Orthodox nations as NATO allies. Yugoslavia maintained neutrality, while Islamic Albania allied with China against both blocs.
Post-Cold War Yugoslavia disintegrated along civilizational fault lines.
Catholic Croatia and Zapna gained independence with German support. Muslim majority, Bosnia declared independence, backed by Islamic nations.
When Orthodox Serbia intervened to preserve Yugoslavia, civilizational warfare erupted. Western powers supported Croatia against Serbia. Muslim nations armed Bosnians against Serbs.
NATO member Turkey directly fought Serbs, while Western allies paradoxically supported Muslims to counter Orthodox influence. Greece, though NATO member, advocated Orthodox alliance against Islamic expansion, opposing Western actions against Serbia. Russia staunchly supported Orthodox Serbia, despite post-Soviet weakness. Even during its weakest post-USSR period, Russia genuinely supported its Orthodox Yugoslav ally within its capacity. Finally, this bloody war concluded through mediation by core states of respective civilizations.
Bosnia remains divided along civilizational lines into Muslim Croat Federation and Serb Republic entities, neighbors in proximity but strangers in reality.
From post-Cold War realignments and Bosnian War case study, Huntington developed his theory of fault line wars between civilizations. First, civilizational borderlands see revived ethnic identities after ideological collapse. In Tito's Yugoslavia, Bosnians prioritized socialist, Yugoslav identity over religious differences.
Bosnian Muslims rarely visited mosques, Croats avoided churches, Serbs skipped Orthodox services, all united as Yugoslav comrades.
Ethnic, religious differences were irrelevant under socialist brotherhood.
Yugoslavia's collapse unleashed extremist forces, exploiting cultural divides. Once ignited, civilizational hatred creates self-reinforcing cycles of violence. Former neighbors became mortal enemies. Defenders of faith versus culture-destroying barbarians. Civilization-based identity fueled devastating grassroots, fault line wars.
Second, conflict parties instinctively seek support from civilizational kin states, forming civilizational alliances. This dynamic manifested clearly in Bosnia. Croats sought support from Catholic Germany, aligning Western powers against Orthodox Serbs. Bosnian Muslims rallied global Islamic support with fighters from Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Russian and Greek volunteers joined Orthodox Serbs, battling both Catholic Croats and Bosnian Muslims. Ultimately, fault line wars resolved through two paths.
First, exhaustion of warring parties' resources and will.
Second, core states negotiating compromises and restraining client states within their civilizational spheres. This was demonstrated when Russia compelled Serbia to accept the Dayton Peace Accords. Huntington's analysis reveals post-Cold War conflicts, shifting from ideology to civilizational divides. Civilization structure around core states, peripheral nations, and influence zones.
Civilizational fault lines breed conflicts determining humanity's trajectory.
As Western scholar, Huntington's central concern: who challenges Western civilization and how to respond. In 1996, when writing, Western dominance seemed absolute post-Cold War, Gulf War victories under U.S. hegemony.
Other civilizations appeared weakened, Russia declined, Orthodox civilization, stagnant Yugoslavia dissolved.
As for Chinese civilization, China was in early market reforms with limited national power, showing no capability or will to challenge the West.
Islamic civilization, weakened by the Gulf War and lacking core leadership, saw key states like Saudi Arabia and Turkey ally with the U.S.
The Islamic world remained fragmented and disorganized. Latin American civilizations, similarly fragmented and Western-aligned, posed no threat but potential alliance for the West. Japan's isolated civilization lacked strategic depth and remained dependent within Western alliances. Huntington considered Japan part of the Western Bloc rather than a challenger. So who could truly challenge Western civilization? Huntington concluded, only Confucian and Islamic civilizations might fundamentally challenge the West.
He envisioned a Sino-Islamic alliance as the gravest Western challenge since Constantinople's fall in 1453.
China's growing economic vitality would drive it to seek regional dominance through historical legacy and scale. All major powers, Britain, America, USSR, pursued expansion. During industrialization, China would likely follow. Huntington's containment strategy: strengthen U.S.-Japan alliance with Australia and Southeast Asian partners. His wariness of China demonstrated remarkable foresight. 2 decades later, China emerges as the sole civilization capable of comprehensive challenge across all 14 Western-dominated domains. China's financial institutions, like a IIB, are challenging Western financial dominance. Shanghai's interbank rates now join LIBOR and Fed rates in shaping global capital markets. The yuan's IMF reserve currency status marks accelerating internationalization. 1.3 billion consumers entering middle class will create the world's largest market. China has long been the world's factory floor. Chinese manufacturing output surpasses next. Several nations combined with rapidly modernizing navy building overseas bases. China leads in high-tech patents and research papers with explosive growth. Mass-producing STEM talent. China operates space stations, quantum satellites, and full-spectrum defense systems from J-20 stealth fighters to aircraft carriers. To Huntington's school, China stands unique in challenging Western dominance across all traditional domains.
Islamic civilization also worries Huntington despite its fragmentation.
Though lacking core states and modernization setbacks, Islam holds unique strengths. First advantage, exceptionally high Muslim fertility rates. Huntington predicted Muslims would surpass Christians as world's largest group within decades. Second, controlling strategic Eurasian corridor with vital oil resources. Third, Islam's resilience in maintaining cultural identity globally. Fourth, mosque networks enabling grassroots mobilization worldwide.
Combined with growing Muslim populations in Western heartlands, these factors amplify influence. Core Western nations like France and Germany are becoming Francistan and Germanistan, posing unprecedented challenges to Western civilization.
While Confucian civilization challenges Western dominance comprehensively, Islamic civilization pressures through faith and demographics.
Huntington's hypothetical Confucian-Islamic alliance represents Western civilization's ultimate nightmare.
Despite fundamental differences, both civilizations share more with the West than with each other. Confucian civilization shares secular modernity values with the West. Islamic civilization connects with Western roots through Abrahamic traditions. In civilizational conflicts, the enemy of my enemy is my friend becomes universal logic.
Huntington predicts Sino-Islamic coalition against their common Western adversary.
This alliance aligns with rational GLT calculations, evidenced by China's quasi-alliance with Pakistan and strategic partnership with Iran. Western counter-strategy. Unite Christian civilizations, including Orthodox Russia and Catholic Latin America.
Huntington acknowledges global civilizational war would be apocalyptic.
Proposed solutions, avoidance principle, and joint mediation between core states. First, core states must avoid intervening in other civilizations' conflicts, primary condition for peace in multipolar world. Second, core states negotiate to restrain client states and prevent fault line wars through joint mediation. With this, our exploration of the clash of civilizations concludes. Huntington's theory pierces post-Cold War fog, identifying civilizations, not nations, as world's fundamental units. Modern conflicts stem from civilizational divides, structured around core states, peripheries, and frontier zones. Civilizational frontiers form Gödel fault lines.
Humanity's future hinges on how these civilizational fault line conflicts unfold. A Sino-Islamic alliance poses existential threat to Western civilization.
Western countermeasure. Unite Christian civilizations under shared theological heritage.
Global civilization war would be apocalyptic and unacceptable.
Prevention requires core states practicing non-interference and coordinated mediation. This concludes our analysis. Full notes available below. See you tomorrow.